This is an RX 580. This is also an RX 580. Now, there's one major difference between these two RX 580s. Well, besides the looks, that is. They have the same core clock, same core count, same architecture, but this one has 4 gigabytes of VRAM, while this has 8. And for a while, I've said, people have been asking me, oh, what's the best budget card you can buy? And I recommend something like the RX 580, but I say, make sure you buy the 8 gig model. It has double the VRAM, so it must be better, right? Well, I'm going to test these two cards in a few games and see if my claims that the 8 gig model is better, from what I've believed, although that has been rather unsubstantiated for a while, depending on the game, really, but let's talk about that with some gameplay. So, let's see if I can substantiate my claims that the 8 gig model is better. Now, although these cards look like they're extremely different, they have the same core clock. This one's not even more overclocked than this one. The same exact clock speed, and which is crazy considering the difference in the coolers and everything, but I don't know. That's not the point. So, identical cards, the only difference being that this one has 4 gigs less VRAM. So let's see if the RX 580 8 gig really is better than the 4 gig model. Now, the first game I tested was Hitman 2 because I wanted to get a game that I thought would just instantly show the difference between these cards. I put it on ultra settings 1080p. Now, I could do 1440p, but both of these cards would struggle either way, so it wouldn't even matter. So I did 1080p ultra settings on this game, which is very demanding and should take up a lot of VRAM. But, as you can see, both cards were within the 3.5 gig range, and the FPS was pretty similar, averaging, around 40 to 50 FPS on both cards. So, I put them together, side by side because I felt that was the best way to show the 2 FPS counters just for this game. But, sadly, this game, which is one of the most demanding games that I've played in a while, in terms of graphics performance, especially on Ultra, nope, it did not use any more than 3.5 gigs of VRAM on either card. So, I guess we'll have to move on to the next game. So, the next game I tested, just to kind of see, I had a feeling it wouldn't use too much VRAM, but the next game I did test was Rainbow Six Siege, because, normally I test CSGO with graphics cards and CPUs, but it's pointless. CSGO will never use more than 2 to 3 gigs of VRAM on max settings or whatever. So, competitive, either one of these cards is fine, but Rainbow Six Siege is another competitive game where you want to have high FPS, but also, you want to have some detail, especially with shadows and stuff like that, so you can see the shadow of an enemy player before he gets around the corner, etc. So, having a decent graphics card in this game actually matters. So, I played with the 580 4 gig first to just see, is it even going to use more than 3 to 4 gigs, and no, it was basically in the 3.1 to 3.5 gig range the entire time, so I didn't even bother testing with the 8 gig model. After spending about 10 minutes trying to get into the place, as you can see here, I finally got in, and I'm just doing a quick Lone Wolf training run, and I'll play that whole clip for you guys so you guys can just see. The FPS was great, the card performed fine, so for this game, a 584 gig would be plenty, and this was on highest settings.
We need to secure the hostage.
Hands in the package. Securing the package.
Hostage secured. Extract the hostage. Hostiles approaching. Keep the hostage safe.
Run! We have to run. Stay here.
So, the next game I moved on to was Far Cry 5, and this is the game where I knew I could crank up the settings enough to stress the VRAM of this card. And the first thing I did was go into my settings where it has a little VRAM counter, like, oh, what's the max amount of VRAM we're going to use? And I turned on HD textures to make it so it's above 4 gigs, clearly in the settings. And this is the game I knew I could, show the difference between the cards. Now, in the beginning, you can clearly see, it's using like 3.9 gigs of VRAM, and, it's doing fine. I'm just playing the game. Pretty simple. If you're just playing, yeah, and you could definitely turn down settings, but just to show the difference between these two cards, here is where it actually gets different, is when I approach this outpost, and you can see the game starts struggling. It's laggy. I'm clearly going over my VRAM limit. It says 3.9 gigs, but it basically means 4, and it's run out of VRAM. And the card is now lagging, the game is lagging. So this is where, on highest settings, HD textures, anti-aliasing and all that, on Far Cry 5, yes, you might notice the difference, but, I mean, to be completely real, it's, you can just turn down the settings a bit and be fine. Now, I also tested with the 8 gig card just to make sure I'm not just getting some random results that, it's lagging every time, and this said it was much better. Basically, the game felt a little smoother as it's not getting up against its VRAM limit, although it's using a gig to 2 gigs more of VRAM, because now that it has more to work with, the game will take it to up its settings and quality as well, and this will come into play in the next game as well. But it's clear that it is definitely performing better in this game, specifically with HD textures and all ultra settings, than the 4 gig model did, especially when we're at the outpost blowing stuff up. Clearly, it's not choppy. The FPS is much higher, the average and everything in the 1% lows. So, the game performs better on the 8 gig card. So, in this specific case, yes, the 8 gig model is better. Moving on to Warzone, because I have a suspicion about this game, and I, for that reason, started with the 8 gig card. I don't know what was happening with Afterburner that it stopped showing the names, but basically you can see memory and GPU. So this is the 8 gig card first. And as you can see, the game is clearly using, throughout most of this little warm-up scene, 7 gigabytes of VRAM. Now, it is the 8 gig card, so it has an extra gig, but it's using about 6, and it's clearly changing, so about 7 gigabytes of VRAM throughout the whole time. These are high settings with maximum field of view, because it makes me feel like I'm running faster, so I play on maximum field of view. And throughout this warm-up, you can see it's using 7 gigabytes of VRAM, average, and the FPS is fine. We get in the plane and then we do our jump, because I usually show the jump scene because it's obviously probably the most intensive. It's got the most loading in, and that's where we jump up to about 7.8 gigabytes of VRAM, and we come up against our limit on that card. Now, what's weird is that, okay, on these settings, it looks like we're using almost 8 gigabytes of VRAM at this point in the game. So the 4 gig model should probably be running out of VRAM at this point in the game. But I've had a suspicion from what I've heard from other people about their FPS on this game, with things like the GTX 980 and stuff, with it having only 4 gigs of VRAM. So I'm going to show you guys the 4 gig card, and we're going to talk about that. Let's switch over to that card now. So here I am jumping into warm-up on the 4 gig card. And as you can see, VRAM usage has been cut in half, almost cut in half from last time. Using the 8 gig card, we were up against, 7 to 7.8 gigs, up against the 8 gig limit. But I haven't changed a single setting. I changed nothing between the games except for the card. I told Call of Duty, it asked, oh, you've changed your settings, you want us to configure optimally? I said no, it is the same exact settings.
and the FPS is a little lower, admittedly. You can clearly see it is a little lower than last time, but it's not so much lower that you would think, oh, it's missing 3 gigs of VRAM that it needs to be using here. So it's clear that the game is scaling down some settings, maybe render distance or quality, that you don't change to save VRAM, which is, you know, depending on what you know, if you want to think about it good or bad, but you know, it's however you feel about that. The game is basically lowering its settings and quality to, you know, save more VRAM when it can, which is, you know, like I said, if you want to think of it as a good thing, it's a good thing. If not, because it's kind of stopping you from upgrading your card, because maybe you do need a graphics card upgrade, but the game's just going to lower its settings to kind of save your card. So that's really it. Alright, so conclusion, you know I like to leave these videos with a GTA 5 police chase at max settings, and this is the 4 gig model at max settings. I wanted to see if I could maybe try to push up the VRAM limit at, you know, maximum settings in game, but that never happened, so I didn't even bother testing with the 8 gig card. It didn't even reach that 3.9 where I'm like, oh, it's using all of its VRAM. But this is the point. So what do I think in the end? Well, it looks like I was partially wrong. Now, the reason I was wrong, and the reason I've always been like, buy the 8 gig model, is because I've almost been comparing it to the 3 and 6 gig GTX 1060s. The 3 gig 1060 is not the same as the 6 gig 1060 with 3 less gigs of VRAM. It also has some cut down CUDA cores, lower clock speeds, or something like that. They are different cards as well. They don't just have different amounts of VRAM. The 584 gig and 588 gig are the same exact GPU, except for that one has 4 gigs more VRAM, and that is the only difference as far as I know. And looking at AMD's website, I can see they are the same cards except for VRAM differences. And VRAM is, you know, it's important in some games, especially like Call of Duty and stuff, where it can use a lot, and Far Cry at max settings. But it's mostly comes into play when you're playing at higher resolution. So if you wanted to play a game at 1440p, like let's say GTA 5 at 1440p, which is something that I like playing at, you would definitely want the more VRAM, the 8 gig card. But in terms of if you can find a good deal, and that's where it comes in, if you can get the card for 30-40 bucks off, then yes, the 4 gig card is absolutely fine. It's just a 580 with some less VRAM, and you can definitely scale your settings accordingly. But that's really it. I'm gonna leave you guys with this police chase, because you know I like doing that in the video to maybe, you know, make it a little longer. And some people like GTA, so might as well put it, because I'm not playing it on stream. It's boring. Epic Games killed it. But that's the point. So I'm gonna leave you guys with this. That's just my opinion on the card. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, or you hate me or something, leave it in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Come on! Let's party, gentlemen!